Thank you. Thanks to everyone for attending. Those of you watching online at C-SPAN and on Cato.org, I want to thank our conference staff and also my colleague Charles Zacabe, who's been studying the Navy with me for several years now, I guess. Charles will tell you that I've been wanting to do an event or something, a paper or both, on the Navy for a long time. I'm really pleased with how well this came together. I can't think of anybody who is more qualified than Undersecretary Work to speak to these issues. I thought that was an excellent presentation. I'm thankful to Ben and Eric for being here. See a number of familiar faces in the audience, including a couple of my classmates from the George Washington University NROTC unit. Yes, it's true. I'm a Navy partisan. Okay, I'll admit it. I'm from Maine. Okay, I don't know how I could. This is the home of Bath Iron Works and Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, right? And when I was young, Brunswick Naval Shipyard. So how can I not be a naval partisan? Oh, and by the way, my name is Preble, right? So as you know, the cards were stacked in a certain direction from the very beginning. So I'm not going to be. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Okay, I am a Navy partisan. And I think it's particularly important for those of us who care so deeply about the Navy to have this kind of a discussion, okay? Because if we don't scrutinize every single one of these decisions, and yes, I admit we're making the under's job harder. He's used to that, right? That's what he gets paid the big bucks for, right, Bob? That's what it's all about.
Very big, very big.
We need to have this kind of discussions, because if we as Navy partisans don't have that discussion, others are going to have it for us, including people who don't have the same kind of commitment to the surface fleet that we have. So that's how I come to this issue. Littoral combat ship, littoral combat ship. The LCS has had problems. We know about this. Look, I know a thing or two, a few things about deploying on a first-in-class ship, okay? When I reached the Ticonderoga in March of 1990, the boat had been in the water for 9 years, and we were still working through some of the problems associated with being the first ship in the class, okay? And I understand this can take time. And I take the under at his word. They have responded to these issues. They believe they've addressed these issues. They believe they have a plan for getting this program on track. But I just want to dwell for a minute. I don't want to dwell on the specifics of what was raised about LCS-1. I want to look past that. I want to say there are alternatives to the LCS. And in that respect, I do respectfully disagree with Undersecretary Work. Eric talked about the national security cutter. Ben Friedman and I, yes, it's true. We wrote a paper a couple of years ago making the case for frigates or a successor to the frigates. We think that there is an alternative that could achieve a similar mission at less of a cost. But I think I have seen a bit of a change, even just in the last few months, okay? I think we're in the minority. I think there were many people in the service community, to Undersecretary Work's comments, who had a lot of skepticism about this program all along because it was small, because they wanted a big ship with big guns, okay? And there's been a lot of skepticism about small ships for a long time. But I think a lot of people are coming around to the position. This is what Commander Salamander on his blog wrote last week. The sad truth is we are well past killing this program. Though we will bemoan the opportunity cost for decades, this will make it to the fleet. The big questions now are, one, how will we manage to optimize a suboptimal platform in a manner that gives the fleet commanders the best possible platform given its limitations? And how do we ensure we employ the platform in a manner that does not unnecessarily imperil our sailors? LCS will, for many yapping from the cheap seats, I'm still quoting here, be the gift that keeps on giving, unquote. Well, you can guess I'm the one yapping from the cheap seats, okay? Are there aspects of the LCS program that deserve a second look? I want to amplify a point that Ben raised. Do we really need two different types? Should we revisit the decision to go with two very different designs and not a down select? It was supposed to be a down select. This was supposed to be a competition. And at the 11th hour, the Navy decided otherwise, and Congress affirmed that. Again, I want to emphasize, I am not opposed to a dual buy in principle. I deployed on a ship that was a dual buy ship, right? And when I was on Ticonderoga and another Aegis class cruiser pulled up behind me on the pier, I didn't know whether it was a Bath ship or an Ingalls ship, Pascagoula ship, until I walked on the quarterdeck. Okay? And I guarantee you that most people, including many surface people, if they don't have all of the hull numbers memorized, the same thing goes with the DDG-51s. I ask you, if you don't know, if you haven't memorized all the hull numbers, can you look at two Burke-class destroyers side by side and say, that's a Bath destroyer, that's an Ingalls destroyer? Okay? Well, anyone at all who looks at LCS-1 and LCS-2 side by side knows these are different ships. Okay? So what does that mean? I'll tell a sea story here. Okay? When I pulled up, I'm getting ready to go on deployment. I could walk down the pier to any CG-47 class. Didn't matter. Vertical launch or the rail launchers like the original ship that I was on. Walk down the passageway, same passageway. Unbolt from the deck, from the bulkhead, the valve that I needed to deploy, and march that in the street. Now I understand that this the statute of limitations on doing this has expired, right? So no one's going to get thrown in the brig for doing what? Yes, I admit I wasn't supposed to do that, but I was the main propulsion assistant. I was responsible for getting a ship underway. I cannibalized new construction valves once, okay, in order to make sure that my ship was ready to deploy. Okay, so those kinds of advantages of a dual buy, yes, but the same ship. Okay, another case. There is the training pipeline. You know, when we got ready to deploy, I had two second-class petty officers in my division, main propulsion division. These were two of the finest enlisted men I'd ever dealt with. Okay, in fact, one of them I know for a fact made senior chief, and I think the other one made chief. They came on my ship. They had never deployed on a Tycho before. They came from a Spruance-class destroyer. They qualified as a watch officer in about a week. And they were an engineering officer of the watch, an EOW, by about midway through that first deployment. Okay? Never on a Tycho. The training pipeline below the waterline was identical. Okay? And some of the other training for the other systems, of course, we had the same guns on the Tycho as they did on the Spruance-class destroyers. So I'm worried about that. Now, yes, this is a problem that you can solve with more money. Okay? There's going to be some, training that's unique to the vessels, and I want to commend. I am sympathetic to the idea of having multiple crews assigned to a single ship, or several crews, and you can have some I understand that. It makes sense to me. But where does the training pipeline? How does the training pipeline support that? Can you truly deploy a guy who starts out in LCS-1 to LCS-2 to LCS-6, as opposed to from LCS-5 to LCS-8? Okay, that's my question. Other concerns: manning. Okay, this has been raised. These vessels are supposed to be minimally manned, okay? As I understand it, so a core crew of 40 was the original design. As I understand it, we've learned this from operating in the fleet. It's undermanned. Okay? Now my understanding is the Navy is considering increasing the core crew perhaps by 50%, maybe 60. There's some speculation that they're looking at increasing the crew size far more than that. Okay? But when you do that, you start to trade away some of the core advantages of LCS vice the alternatives, including the FFGs. So my bottom line is we're trading dozens of warships, small warships. Again, I'm not opposed to small warships, not at all. Okay? We're trading away dozens of small warships, including the Perry-class frigates, in lieu of a fewer number of FFGs when you count the other small warships. The FFG will, the LCS will replace the minesweepers and the PCs with a vessel that has a single mission in mind, not a multi-mission. Modular, yes, if the modules work the way they're supposed to, but that's and less survivable in a combat setting. And again, I think Undersecretary Werg made a compelling case for the high-low mix. Again, I'm not opposed to that in principle. While we're on the subject of trade-offs, trading off one vessel against the other, I have to say it. We've made this decision to build very large aircraft carriers, 100,000 plus tons. At least $14 billion to build the next one. I'd be shocked if it actually comes in at $14 billion. That's about 7 DDG-51s by my simple-minded math, or about what, 28 LCSs? Am I doing the math right? Is that right? About right? And the opportunity costs aren't just in the surface fleet, okay? We also have an opportunity cost of SSBNX versus all surface combatants. We're planning to build 12 of the new ballistic missile submarines, the Ohio-class follow-on. The target average cost of $5.3 billion in this year dollars. 2 months ago, the Navy estimated that the lead ship in the program will cost $11.7 billion, and last year, CBO estimated that the lead ship would cost $13.3 billion. I'm curious, Eric, if you guys have revisited that yet, because that number to me looks pretty daunting. Okay, and why do I dwell on this in a forum that's supposed to be about the surface fleet? Because these are opportunity costs. If we decide to invest so much in that SSBNX, we are giving up some in the shipbuilding budget, unless you believe, and I don't think anyone here on this panel believes, that the shipbuilding budget is likely to increase by 50 or 60%. Okay, so I think it is important to dwell on these numbers and compare and weigh the costs of each against the other. And also, let me be very clear, I say this not because I'm a swell, not because I have something against submarines. It's because I just don't think we need 10 or 12 ballistic missile submarines to have a credible deterrent. In fact, another program that Ben Friedman and I are working on here at Cato is talking about moving from a nuclear triad to a nuclear dyad. It's a lot of the work we're doing. Even if the submarine leg survives, if it turns out that we don't need all three legs of the triad, even if it does survive, I don't think it's obvious that these boats need to be nearly as expensive as current projections. So let me close with a somewhat different, a bigger picture beyond what's already been said here, because I want to say a few things about the Navy surface fleet's mission. And it's really an age-old question. Are we going to remain the world's policeman? Is that the object? Is that the goal? Is that what we're trying to do here? A key component of that mission is reassurance. Discourage other countries from defending themselves in their interests. That's what that means, reassurance, okay? They are reassured, they are secure, they do not need to do these things. Here in Washington, there is this notion that it's generally better to have one country providing these services because other countries wouldn't do it as well as we could, or they might try and they would mess it up, okay? And it's better for us to be doing these things. They might grow too capable, we wouldn't like that. So look at how this works in practice. We have a recent case in the South China Sea, the Scarborough Shoal between the Philippines and the Chinese. And the Filipinos expect that we will defend their territorial claim against competing claims by the Chinese. The United States, chiefly via the U.S. Navy, will also do this, we're expecting, for Taiwan, Brunei, Vietnam, Malaysia, others. They're not worried because the U.S. Navy has their back. Right? In the context of the surface fleet, then, and the LCS specifically, we're building a Coast Guard cutter for other people's coasts. That's what this is. Okay? And other countries are choosing not to build anything at all. Now, they have grown accustomed to this. They've sheltered under our protective umbrella for a long, long time. They've become very dependent upon the U.S. Navy, and they're not worried. And some people in this town, indeed many people here in Washington, like it that way. They like being the world's policeman. They like being the guarantor of global security. That's another buzzword. Or the global force for good. That's the U.S. Navy's latest recruiting slogan, right? And if others are less inclined to defend themselves and their interests, that's okay, as far as many people in the foreign establishment here in Washington see it. I see things differently. My colleagues here at Cato see things differently. We doubt that the benefits of global primacy are outweighed by the costs. We dispute the claim that globalization depends upon a single superpower to police the commons and enforce the rules. We here at Cato think it would not be such a bad thing for other countries to contribute more to global security, but we doubt that they will do so long as the United States taxpayers are picking up the tab and so long as the U.S. Navy, especially, is on the front line of every potential dispute. Now, we are lonely but not alone in this fight. Polling data shows that most Americans want desperately for others to shoulder the burden of defending themselves and their interests. One poll found that 79% of Americans think that we spend too much money defending others. This is by pollster Scott Rasmussen. 79% think we spend too much money defending others. A mere 4% think we don't spend enough. Recall, too, that then CNO Admiral Mike Mullen proposed, just before he ascended to the chairmanship, a 1,000-ship Navy. He envisioned a system in which the United States would remain the world's preeminent military power with a naval projection power second to none. And yet he also envisioned that other countries would have navies, would be capable of defending themselves and their interests, and would contribute to global security in a measure that was consistent with their interests and their capabilities. Our current plans seem to be headed in exactly the opposite direction. And I would hope that it isn't too late to revisit that decision as well. Thank you.